Newsrooms are typically immersed in political coverage, especially during an election year, but now they're having to focus more and more on saving their own businesses instead. Business leaders face strong headwinds, spurring disruptive changes that can no longer be put off if they want to survive. The latest instance, the Washington Post, whose American editor Sally BuzzFeed stepped down abruptly Sunday night.
In fact, Bloomberg, the Wall Street Journal, and the Washington Post are now all being led by Brits. Then there are outlets such as BuzzFeed, where former GOP presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy has bought an 8% stake, and he has said he wants to bring in Tucker Carlson. American media companies are focused on consumer revenue amid a weak ad market and an increasing threat from AI. So, to unpack what all this means is Steve Krakauer, author of Uncovered: How the Media Got Cozy with Power, Abandoned Its Principles and Lost the People. Steve is also the executive producer for The Megyn Kelly Show. So Steve, what do we make of all this? What's the big picture here? What's your general take on it all?
Well, there's a lot happening. First of all, it is interesting, and no offense here, but why are all these American media companies being taken over by the Brits? I find this very strange. It's one thing to say, okay, we need some more diversity in our newsroom. Maybe we go outside of our normal points of view, some ideological diversity, maybe geographic diversity. Why is everyone British? I find that completely bizarre. And I think,
just to cut across you, Steve, as an Irish person, I'm all in favour of hitting the Brits where we can. But anyway, proceed with your other point.
Okay, all right, then let's go after them. Look, I find the Washington Post is a great microcosm of what's going on here. The Washington Post was enormously successful during the Trump era, during the Trump administration. It was really kind of feeding this resistance bait to its audience, and they ate it up. And it brought in enormous business, enormous audience, a lot of readers and new subscribers. Great. Well, then Donald Trump leaves office. And yes, it's true he's back on the main stage, but I think that actually kind of exemplifies where we're at and why this isn't working. It kind of reminds me of this, like the Pawn Stars meme. It's like, you wanted to save democracy and hold Donald Trump accountable. Well, best I can do is there was someone on a drop-down menu that wrote legal expenses, and we're going to charge that up to 34 felonies. How do you feel about that? It's like, well, this isn't working. No one feels comfortable after this. It feels icky, and we need a shower, and that's even before you introduce the porn star into this whole thing. So the trial was a failure, and I think so many of these efforts that have not really moved outside of the box of trying to what else does America care about, and our audience is not coming back. That anti-Trump audience is not coming back, even with him on the main stage. It's a Trump-Biden rematch, which is so boring. And now we have to find something else going on. It hasn't happened. And so, yes, now there's the controversy about, well, we brought in some white guys and maybe a couple British white guys. But the problem is, it's not working. The newsroom is so far away from what the principles of journalism used to be. It needs to a full sale, just reworking, and it hasn't happened yet. And I don't know when it's going to happen, because right now we're in the middle of an election season. It's a lot's going to change in the next 6 months.
So, Steve, I agree with, I think, a lot of that. I think one of the main critiques that we make on this show is that mainstream media often is a kind of, instead of critiquing the establishment, you get a lot of stenographers for the establishment that are basically writing what is coming out of a White House briefing room, right? But I want to go to this question of what might happen at a place like BuzzFeed with Vivek Ramaswamy saying, bring Tucker Carlson in. Are there some limits to how much an existing institution might be open to a really strong shift in ideology, the way that BuzzFeed, which is a liberal left-leaning outlet that is mostly known for listicles and, kind of funny YouTube shorts, is bringing Tucker Carlson in really the be-all and all solution to outlets that are having these sort of financial woes?
Yeah, well, the short answer is no. I don't think that's the solution. But I'm not even really sure Vivek actually thinks that's the solution either. I think, though, your point is such a good one, because look at the Washington Post. Where are they hamstrung? Their owner is like the largest corporate oligarch, Jeff Bezos, who's interested in power and money. He's got all the money in the world, and so now it's all about power. You think you're really going to start to turn that institution into something that is a check on power, like the Fourth Estate is supposed to be? I mean, it's a lost cause. So yeah, I mean, what Vivek is trying to do with BuzzFeed, I think, is interesting. BuzzFeed has been a complete failure, partially because they tried to be crusty old legacy media. They wanted to be CBS. Like, who wants to be CBS? That's a failing proposition. This is a company that is, it's making lots of money, but it's dying. Why would you try to mimic that? And obviously, we saw the effect of that. BuzzFeed News no longer exists. I mean, it was such a failure that it's completely gone. Now, what they have is a name. Now, it's not necessarily a great name recognition, but it's a name, and they've got massive social audience. They've got these boosters that are ready to go if you can put the right content there. And I think Vivek's point, though, about Tucker Carlson, because he sort of mirrored that with, yes, the Tuckers of the world, but also the Tulsi Gabbards and Destiny. Frankly, why has this show been successful? It's because you have people that do not necessarily agree, but they have strong points of view in different ideological directions. They're kind of in a messy, complicated way in some instances. They do not follow the establishment norms. They're not just the left-right people that hang out in the green room and then get on the air and yell at each other. And so I think that model actually could be successful. I mean, we've seen it be successful in independent media. And what you have in BuzzFeed is a company that you're not completely reinventing the wheel. This is a digital property that yes, I think that if there were people within BuzzFeed that wanted to kind of follow the Vivek model of saying, let's bring in people with all sorts of points of views and let's do interesting content that's a check on power. And I mean, that could work. I don't have high hopes for it, but I think that actually is the right thought about where the media should be going.
Steve, a couple of questions just on what you have said and another topic we haven't mentioned. At the very start, I think you characterised the difficulties of the Washington Post as being related to what you consider an anti-Trump position. But is it that people don't like what you would characterise as anti-Trump, or is it that with President Biden in power, Trump does not have the capacity to create the levels of engagement either in critical coverage of him or in supportive coverage of him? Because as I understand it, the web traffic for more conservative-leaning outlets, particularly places like Breitbart, is also way down. So is it really a pushback against quote-unquote anti-Trump coverage, or is it just that President Biden doesn't drive the same level of emotional engagement in either direction?
No, I think President Biden is a terrible foil. If we're just stepping back from an objective point of view, it's boring. This is an example where the sequel is just not living up to the hype of the original. I mean, no one really wanted this. And I say that with an asterisk. Obviously, there are people who are big Trump fans. They're not a huge number of the conservative population, but there's some of them. I don't really know a lot of like hardcore I love Joe Biden fans. I mean, there are people that think he's fine, and then there are people that are not fans. But so yes, you have at the center stage of our political environment right now in 2024, two candidates that are largely unpopular, and they're not just. And this is the key point. It's not just that they're unpopular with the political basis. They are unpopular from a cultural point of view. Most people in the country are not cable news junkies who are tuning in, who are reading the Washington Post every day and refreshing it like I do, or on spending their time on X and seeing whatever fighting that's going on from one side to the other. They're not doing that. They're checking in on what's important and what matters, and they are exhausted and they're disinterested in what we have right now in 2024. I saw this amazing poll from Semaphore. How many people, mostly young people under 30, who say it doesn't matter who wins, nothing's going to change. That's a red flag, not just for the political apparatus in this country, but also for the media to say, what are you covering? Whatever you're saying about the stakes is not translating to the average person in this country.
I'd be remiss not to bring up what is an elephant in the room for so many, I think, real journalists, as I would describe them. I'm sitting next to one today. I mean, I hear people like David Sirota talking about this all the time. When you mention the idea of bringing in, let's say, the Destinies and some of the online streaming content creators of the world, there's a part of me that says, oh gosh, what's going to happen to original reporting? Isn't part of the problem is that we don't have small local newsrooms anymore that are covering local stories? There's this huge story in Atlanta right now where a major American city is out of water, and they're relying on the New York Times to have enough interest to cover it 1,000 miles away. There's so much of the fighting fighting that you just described online, I think, because the currency is to engage with what someone else has said on the internet, as opposed to going out into the world and finding out what's happening in people's communities. And that takes money, right? It doesn't always have an immediate payoff, which is part of why newsrooms have cut down their investigative reporting. They've cut things like having labor reporters. I mean, what's to be done about that if everyone's just chasing the bottom line? And is that kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy where if you think short term, let's just bring in someone who's big and popular online, Tucker, Destiny, whomever, are you eventually creating a world where people are increasingly disaffected and untrusting of the media because the media, frankly, is just reporting on itself instead of doing this original reporting?
Yeah, no, it's a great point. I think there's two elements of this that are really important to bring up. First of all, it is true. I think local news reporting that has lost for business reasons as well as editorial reasons, but certainly just from the changing business model, that's really harmed communities, and I do think that that's a big one. And I think it's also worth pointing out that even at these large media organizations like the Washington Post or CNN, I'm often critical of because I used to work at CNN. The New York Times, which has been a frequent punching bag, whether you're on the left or the right. There is great reporting that happens at these organizations every day. A lot of time it gets overshadowed by other places, but there's great reporting, and a lot of it is helpful, and we need that. And I think we really need this partnership between the independent upstarts, between places that are kind of these insurgents, these renegade journalists, if you will, and the institutions that have the backing, that have money. It's very hard. I talked to Rich McHugh, who's at News Nation now, was at NBC, who told me about how, he likes the idea of going, Substack and what you can do on the independent media, but to really do the kinds of reporting that move the needle, that make major change, you need to worry about getting sued. And so you need a legal department. You need the backing, the financial backing to do this sort of reporting that goes with there. So I think we do need this kind of compromise, this combination to really make this work. And the other thing I would just point out is that even as you get to these people that are kind of on the outside and, they're all about debate and discussion, I will just say, I don't think Brianna and I could disagree more on the issue of Israel and Gaza, but I'm watching right now on X the moderator of, I thought, a fine debate that she was involved in, who's having a meltdown on X and using things like racist and sexist, really juvenile language. Why? Because it for a moment got kind of called out in a way. And so we see that even in this instance where there are these people that are all about debate and all about discussion and the new way of doing things, even then, I think so often they can go and fall back into these tropes that I would be critical of, whether it's at the institutional media, the establishment press, or even at upstarts now.
Well, Steve, I appreciate you saying that. It's great to have you. D.I. Barbie signing off.
Ridiculous.
Thanks again. Take care.
Thanks, guys.